Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty big, something pretty timely. President Trump's executive orders on immigration, and specifically the one that's targeting birthright citizenship.
Right.
You know, birthright citizenship has been a part of America for, over a century, thanks to the 14th Amendment, but now it's facing a real challenge.
For sure.
And our source today is an article that really dives into the reactions and fallout from this executive order.
Yep.
And let me tell you, it is intense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is not just some, legal debate in the abstract. This is really touching on, what it means to be American.
Right.
Who gets to be American, and it's sparking some pretty serious questions about our values as a nation.
Yeah.
The article does a really good job of showing us sort of both sides of the coin here, so we can really get a handle on the full picture.
All right, so let's jump right into this thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
The executive order, as the article lays it out, wants to block birthright citizenship for kids born in the U.S. if their parents are here legally, but only temporarily.
Right.
So they could be, have visas, they could be here legally, but they're not citizens, and so this would prevent their children born here from being citizens.
Right.
And it got hit with a legal challenge, immediately. And Judge Koffner didn't mince words at all. He called it blatantly unconstitutional.
Wow.
Can you imagine being born in the U.S.
Yeah.
but not considered a citizen?
That's a wild thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. What's fascinating here is this idea has been brewing for decades.
Really?
John Tanton, a really, really big name in the anti-immigration movement, has been pushing to end birthright citizenship for years and years.
Wow.
And his organization, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, has been very vocal about it. And their president, Dan Stein, actually came out praising Trump's order as fulfilling his, campaign promises on immigration.
Wow. So this isn't just coming out of nowhere.
Not at all.
But why would they want to change something so fundamental to how we define citizenship?
Right.
I mean, what's the reasoning there?
Well, if we look at Tanton's book, The Immigration Invasion, it's pretty clear that his main goal was to preserve what he called a European-American majority. And this idea ties into this whole, white genocide and great replacement rhetoric that we see, bubbling up. And the article touches on that as well.
So they're saying that certain people shouldn't be allowed to become citizens based on their background.
Yeah, essentially that's what it boils down to. And, it's a pretty stark picture of how they view this issue.
It seems like a pretty slippery slope.
It definitely raises some eyebrows.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about who gets to be a citizen. It's also about what it means to be a citizen.
Right.
And, the article quotes this immigration lawyer, Hassan M. Ahmad.
Yeah.
And he uses this really striking comparison. He says, American citizenship under this order would be like a Costco membership.
Wow.
You can get it, but you can also lose it pretty easily.
That's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah.
If citizenship can be revoked so easily, I mean, what does that really mean for our national identity?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is a big one.
It's a huge question. And the article, it doesn't shy away from showing us the emotional side of all of this.
Yeah.
Anthony Romero from the ACLU, he talks about the possibility of creating a permanent subclass of people, born here but denied their full rights.
That's a chilling thought,
Yeah.
and it brings up, some really dark parts of our history.
Right.
Have we really come so far if we're still talking about denying basic rights based on somebody's background?
It's a question worth pondering for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that, this fear and uncertainty is very real for a lot of immigrant communities right now.
Yeah.
The article does a really good job of capturing that.
Yeah.
But it also, brings in some other very important voices.
Right, like Mark Hetfield from HIS, who's really worried about the impact on refugee resettlement, especially with the order also putting a hold on refugee admissions.
Exactly. And, Elizabeth Goitein from the Brennan Center, she criticizes this increasing militarization of immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
Which this order seems to be pushing even further.
That's a big concern. And speaking of militarization, the article mentions Tom Homan, the former acting ICE, being appointed as a border czar.
Oh, wow.
And, he's not exactly known for being lenient, especially after his role in the family separation policies, during Trump's last term.
Right.
And then there's Mark Lamb, the former sheriff, with ties to some pretty fringe anti-government theories,
Yep.
who's now advising FAIR on reaching out to law enforcement. So it seems like they're really trying to get local police even more involved in immigration enforcement.
That's interesting.
So the article is painting a pretty bleak picture here.
Yeah.
Mass deportations are very much on the table, and it even uses the term injustice porn to describe how some people are trying to downplay the suffering these policies could cause.
Wow.
What do you make of that term?
Well, it certainly grabs your attention, doesn't it?
It does.
But more importantly,
Mm-hmm.
I think it forces us to confront the fact that we're not just talking about abstract ideas here.
Right.
This is about real people's lives.
Yeah.
Families being torn apart, fundamental rights being eroded.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. And it's not just happening at the border.
No.
If this executive order sticks, it could affect anyone born in the U.S. who doesn't fit the administration's very narrow definition of citizenship.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the article points out the restrictive language that's used in the order when defining mother and father as the biological progenitors of a child. And that language is unsettlingly similar to the rhetoric we see from, white nationalist groups who are pushing those white genocide and great replacement theories.
Right.
So it's very disturbing to see those ideas kind of creeping into official policy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about, the people who are actually shaping this agenda.
Right.
The article mentions Stephen Miller, who is, back in a key White House role, and he's got known ties to some pretty extremist groups.
So, do you think his influence is a cause for concern?
Well, it's hard not to be concerned when, someone with those connections has the president's ear.
Right.
And it's not just Miller. The article also brings up the Center for Immigration Studies, or CIS.
Yeah.
And the Southern Poverty Law Center has labeled them a hate group.
Wow.
And they've been pushing for these kinds of policies for a long time. They've even called for using the Insurrection Act to carry out mass deportations.
Was that even legally possible?
I don't know.
It's a very legally murky area.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so dangerous.
Right.
Elizabeth Goitein from the Brennan Center, who we mentioned earlier, she's quoted in the article, and she called it a massive abuse of emergency power.
Wow.
So, it sets a really scary precedent.
So even with all the legal challenges, is there a chance that this executive order could actually hold up?
The fight is far from over.
Right.
The article mentions at least 6 lawsuits filed against the order. And while Judge Coffner's ruling, is definitely a step in the right direction,
Yeah.
these legal battles could drag on for months, even years.
So what happens to the families who are, caught in the middle while this plays out? It must be incredibly stressful to not know, what their future holds.
It's a humanitarian crisis waiting to happen.
Yeah.
This executive order, and really this whole anti-immigration agenda behind it, raises some huge questions about, the direction our country is headed in.
It seems like we're in the midst of a major shift in how we define who belongs here,
Right.
who deserves to be an American. The stakes are incredibly high, not just for immigrants, but for the very fabric of American society.
Yeah.
Where do we even go from here?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the potential consequences are really far-reaching.
Mm.
We've seen erosion of civil liberties,
Right.
increased discrimination, and even, deeper divisions within our communities.
Yeah.
The article also mentions plans to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy and restrict access to the CBP One app, which helps migrants, navigate the asylum process.
It feels like one thing after another.
Yeah.
Is there any end in sight to these restrictive policies?
It's hard to say,
Yeah.
but what is clear is that, these policies are all connected.
Yeah.
They're creating a system that's increasingly hostile towards immigrants and asylum seekers.
Uh-huh.
The article doesn't mince words. It calls these policies draconian, cruel, and unconstitutional.
It's a pretty powerful indictment of what's happening, but the article also highlights something really important.
Yeah.
The human cost of these policies. It talks about families being separated, children being detained in horrible conditions, people being denied basic medical care. It's heartbreaking to read.
It really is.
Do you think we're losing sight of the human element in all of this?
I think it's a real danger
Yeah.
when we start viewing people as, statistics or problems to be solved.
Mhm.
It becomes much easier to justify inhumane treatment and, this kind of dehumanization.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tactic that's been used to justify oppressive policies throughout history.
Mm.
So we need to remember that behind every immigration statistic, there's a real person
Yeah.
with hopes and dreams and fears just like ours.
It's a good reminder this whole conversation has been pretty heavy,
Yeah, it has.
but it feels important to be having it.
It is.
So what are your thoughts on how we move forward from here?
I think we need to have honest and open conversations about our values as a nation.
Yeah.
What does it really mean to be American?
Right.
Do we want to be a country that welcomes those seeking refuge or one that shuts its doors to those in need?
Yeah.
The choices we make now are going to have lasting repercussions.
Right.
It's not just about policy. It's about who we are as a people.
Yeah. It really feels like we're at a crossroads here. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexities of this issue.
Yeah.
And I think you've brought up some incredibly important points. Well, thank you.
So where do we go from here? The fight over birthright citizenship is far from over.
Right.
And the article mentions that 6 lawsuits have already been filed against this executive order.
At least 6, yeah.
So what does that tell us about the strength of the legal arguments on both sides?
Well, it's definitely a sign that this is not, an open and shut case.
Yeah.
There are strong arguments to be made on both sides.
Uh-huh.
And it'll be really fascinating to see how the courts navigate this complex legal terrain.
Yeah.
The outcome could have a ripple effect on future immigration policy,
Right.
potentially setting a precedent for how we interpret the 14th Amendment and define citizenship in the 21st century.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to that quote from Hassan M. Ahmad comparing American citizenship to a Costco membership.
Right.
If citizenship can be so easily revoked,
Yeah,
it raises questions about the value we place on it as a society.
for sure.
And what does that mean for the future of American identity?
It's the crucial question, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's one that we all need to grapple with, I think. The article also highlights the very real human cost of these policies,
Yeah.
the fear and the uncertainty that they create for families and individuals.
Right.
And we can't lose sight of that human element,
Yeah.
amidst all of the legal and political battles.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the, abstract debates, but ultimately,
Yeah.
this is about people's lives.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been a sobering reminder of the challenges that we face as a nation
Yeah.
and the importance of staying engaged, in these crucial conversations.
Absolutely.
It's not just about immigration policy.
No.
It's about our values,
Yeah.
our identity, and the kind of future that we want to create for ourselves and for generations to come.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. This has been an eye-opening deep dive, and I'm sure our listeners walking away with a lot to think about.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious.
Yes.
And keep asking the tough questions.
Absolutely.